think that's us. Hi. Share screen. Okay. So welcome. My name is Jen Trechek. I'm a clinical manager at Jigsaw. I'm also a parent. I've got three daughters. Their ages are 11, 8, and 5. Vanessa?
Hi, my name is Vanessa Dowling. I'm a regional clinical manager in Jigsaw, and I have two sons. They're both 14. Yeah.
So bear with us. This is for both of us the first kind of live webinar with parents, so we're very excited. I suppose what we both just wanted to say before we start is that tonight is about supporting young people's mental health in this particular time that we're all going through. And it's based on our previous experience of working with young people and parents at Jigsaw and our own experience as parents. But this is the first time that any of us have been through this current situation that we're all in. So I suppose we're not claiming to have all the answers. We're going to talk to you about what we know and give you, our kind of suggestions or ideas. But if it resonates with you, or if there's things that you find useful, hopefully you will, and please take those. But we don't want anyone to feel under pressure or to feel that they're doing it wrong or getting it wrong based on anything that we say tonight, because I think we're all at the moment just doing our best and feeling our way a little bit. So we just wanted to kind of put that out there from the start to say, take what's helpful, disregard the rest, and just know that you are doing your best. But we thought we'd start with taking you through a few things that we've come across that we have found have been able to apply to the current situation, and then we will answer questions. We've got a few questions have come in, and please do send your questions in as we're talking, or comments or your thoughts or your ideas, and we'll come to those after, if that's okay. So start with Vanessa, and a little bit about coping styles.
So if we just think a little bit about coping styles in families, I suppose one of the things that we're really conscious of is that coping styles can be very different from one person to another. And at the moment, I suppose for all of us, we're confined to our homes. And so we're all kind of together in a small space and trying to navigate our way around with all kinds of different coping styles that are happening. What you'll find is that some people in your family may be very much a doer and keeping busy and trying to really focus on keeping themselves going and being productive. But equally, you might have other members of your family, and their style is to become more kind of threat focused. And so they might want to kind of escape the world right now. They might want to really slow down. They might have become more avoidant. They might really want to spend some time on their own and kind of become a bit more withdrawn. And one of the things we're very conscious of as Jigsaw clinicians is that, sometimes in some families, what you will find is that there may be styles that the majority of the family have, and there may be one or two people in the family that might have a slightly different style. And some styles of coping might be really valued in some families. So if we have parents, for example, that are doers and are really quite productive, and that's their way of coping, and they have found that as the way that really helps them, they expect that the young people in their lives will find that helpful too, and that will be what they will try and encourage and try and kind of push that young person to do. And I suppose that's something we wanted to draw attention to this evening. So if we move on to the next slide, it just shows an example of one way that we might begin to manage our emotions. And this comes from the Compassionate Mind Foundation in the UK. And it's really what compassion focused therapy is based on. So there's 3 different ways that we might use to manage our emotions. One, as I said, might be to become threat focused. So we might become quite anxious or reactive. If we're reactive, we might find that we're kind of reacting to people. We might be getting a bit stressed. We might be pouring our stress around the house. Might be getting a little bit angry or irritable. The other thing that might happen in that style of coping is that we might become quite protective. So we might feel a need to really protect the people in our family. That feeling of wanting to bring the shutters all down and just keep the whole world out. And I suppose in some ways we're being encouraged to do that, but sometimes that might be something that people might overdo as well. I might feel, they just can't relax even in the safety of their own home. And that's because we're trying to seek safety when we're threat focused. So if we find ourselves focusing on the threat as a way of coping, we want to kind of keep ourselves safe. We want to keep our family safe. And so, you know, I've heard all kinds of people describing things like washing all their shopping when they bring it home, and you know, all kinds of kind of maybe more extreme things than what we're being asked to do by the health authorities at the moment. And I suppose the other piece with that, as I said, are to become avoidant and sometimes withdrawal. You know, avoiding the news, avoiding any talk about it. What you will find with some people is they might even be in denial about the fact that there is a pandemic at the moment, because they really just don't want to go there or think about that. The other style of coping that's very often quite common is to become really drive focused. And that's when we really want to keep busy. So we're pursuing something. This, you know, it might be comfort eating. It might be, you know, really trying to consume everything I want to know about COVID at the moment. It might be trying to be really productive, you know, so really planning out your day in such a way that you have every minute counted for, or you're trying to come up with you know, learning something new. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but actually it's more about when that becomes too much or becomes excessive, that it can cause some difficulties and can start to feel overwhelming or just wear you out over time. And also, I suppose when we use that style of coping, but we're not really connected within ourselves to what's going on underneath or to our own emotions, that also can become more of a problem at that point. So the third style of coping is to become more connected and more compassion focused. And I suppose at that time, you know, it's about connecting with ourselves, with what's going on in our internal world. So how am I really feeling? You know, what's my energy like? What's this like for me, kind of being stuck in the house at the moment? You know, am I looking after myself and being nutritious, but also from a compassionate frame of mind? So I suppose that's the peace of mind around looking at how I can be kind to myself, but also be kind to myself, but also take responsibility for the things that I might need to do. And I suppose being connected is not just about being connected with ourselves, it's also about being connected with the other people that I'm living with, and, you know, other people in my life, but also to the world outside. So I might, if I was being more connected or compassion focused, I might pay some attention to the news or some attention to the guidelines that were being given by the government and by the HSC. But I might do that in small chunks, as opposed to really getting lost in that every day and really consuming every little bit of it. Because I might recognize that right now I also need to look after myself, and I don't want to overconsume, because I also want to be soothed and feel safe in my own home and with my own family.
And I suppose you were saying earlier, Vanessa, some of the challenges can happen when maybe I have one particular response and maybe my partner or my children have a different response that I can't understand. So, you know, I like order, I like routine, I like to be busy, and that's the way I'm kind of keeping on top of things. Whereas some other people in the household might have that kind of withdrawal, and I actually can't deal with any of this. I just don't want to think about it, and I just want to go into kind of a more cocooned kind of state of mind with it. And if I can't understand why they're doing that and not sticking to the routine that I want, that's where it can be really challenging.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose it could also create some kinds of conflict in the home as well. You know, if people are disagreeing with the style that I feel this is my way of coping, is all I can do right now. And I suppose right now for a lot of us there is a piece around being in survival mode as well. You know, that we are in a big transition in our lives, and we need to really think about how we look after ourselves and cope with that transition.
And we probably move in and out of the different drives at different times as well. You know, initially we might have found that we're very much in threat kind of drive, and then we're moving into more of a drive focus, and then we're kind of coming to a more compassionate stance. So we're probably moving around there a little bit. And the can I click on? There
Yeah.
we go. So yeah, so I guess a question and something to talk about and think about is routine specifically. And I suppose there's been a lot of focus on maybe sticking to routine, and you need to have a routine as a family. And I certainly went into that initially saying, oh yeah, we've got to get up at the same time every day and continue as if this is business as usual. And I suppose maybe taking a bit of a more compassionate stance on that is taking a step back and kind of looking at what do I need in my routine now? It's not realistic and not necessarily helpful to stick to the same kinds of routines that we had before. We might have different drives and different things that are going on that mean that we maybe become a bit more relaxed in the mornings, or we become a little bit more relaxed in the evenings, or whatever it is. But I think some level of routine is helpful because it can provide a kind of a stability and a sense of security in a time that is really uncertain. So maybe thinking about what are the key things that you feel that you need to have within your day as a family. And is there certain kind of touch points throughout the day that you can agree on? Whether that's having a coffee break and having meals together where you can kind of touch base and see what everybody is doing. But without feeling too under pressure to have to do lots of different things, or to have lots of activities on the go all the time, or to have certain times where you have to do X, Y, or Z. Now, if that's helpful for you and your family, and you find that useful, that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I suppose when it can become stressful is maybe where you feel there's a need for a routine, the rest of the family maybe don't, and it can become a bit of a battleground, or vice versa. I suppose in thinking about routine and what are the touch points that you want during the day, some of the things just to bear in mind that I'd really encourage would be things like physical activity and incorporating that in some way in the day. Now, like I know for teenagers, sometimes that's not easy. And again, you don't want it to become a battleground. But I guess we probably all have found when you do kind of push yourself to get out for a walk or a run or some level of physical activity, you usually end up feeling a little bit better having done that. So I know for us, what we're trying to do is get out in the morning before work and do our kind of walk to work, walk to school as usual, and then that's our start to the day. Whatever works for your family, finding a way around it. Um, does that cover routine?
I suppose I was thinking there as well that sometimes it might be about even just 10 minutes. We have a basketball ring in our garden, and it might be just 10 minutes playing basketball, or 5 minutes if that's all it's going to be. But at least you're getting some fresh air and a little bit of activity. And I think for me, it's about breaking it down into what people are going to commit to and agree with within the family. And it doesn't all have to be together either, I suppose. You might find that people have different types of energy over different parts of the day as well. So what's important really is that as a family, we stop and think about, well, how are we going to make sure we get some activity in, because that we know that will make us feel good, and that's something that helps our well-being, and it stops us feeling quite so cooped up all the time. So I think for me, it's maybe a little bit more around that.
And I guess in terms of the kind of checking in and the touch points during the day, that's kind of helpful in terms of motivation, because I know we do online chats with young people, and some of the things that are coming through is that feeling of under pressure that I have to be doing lots of different things at different times. But also coupled with that is kind of finding it hard to find the motivation to doing things. So just having a check-in at a certain point, what have you been up to, what's been going on, without specifying that you need to be doing X, Y, or Z, but just kind of saying there is an expectation of some level of engagement, of doing, but that could be any kind of activity, or it might be okay just to say I was resting for the morning, and that's okay, but just that we're kind of checking in on that. Kind of following on.
I suppose if we think a little bit about compassion and empathy and distress, one of the things that I've become really conscious of as a clinician in Jigsaw working with young people is that sometimes the way that young people, I suppose, show us their distress might be a little bit different than we expect. So sometimes that might be a meltdown at home, or it might be someone throwing a tantrum, or someone starting a row, and that's something for us to really think about as parents. To just stop and consider before we react, I suppose, is the first point. But also, just a part of that consideration is to think about, is there something that this young person is trying to say to me? Are they trying to in some way show their distress or express their distress? And I think that's a really important one for us to think about as parents, because if we recognize as parents that yes, that young person has become very angry and their behavior is maybe not something that we agree with or we endorse, at the same time, if we recognize that that's their way right now of showing distress, it can help us to become more empathetic and show more compassion. So it's not that we're saying that's okay, but it's that we're recognizing that, okay, right now, this is how this young person is showing distress, and what can I do as a parent to support that and to help them to navigate their way through that. And I suppose children of all ages, regardless of whether they're young children or whether they're young teenagers, that's something that we all, as young people, we're learning to navigate our way through, to learn to manage our emotions and how to express our emotions. And distress can be a really difficult one, and it's one of the last ones I think that for most of us that we learn, and we all know adults that still haven't learned that. So we can't expect our young people to have have better I suppose, abilities and capacities to express their emotions than some adults do. So I think it's a learning curve that they're on at this stage of their life, and for us as parents, it's about maybe stopping to recognise that.
And the other thing on that, I suppose, is that they learn from us. So if they can see us kind of expressing the stress in the right way ourselves, and being able to name our emotions and acknowledge some of the challenges that we're facing, but in a contained way, then they can begin to kind of emulate that a little bit as well. This one kind of meant a lot to both of us, and we talked a lot about the idea of space because we're in a very confined situation in a lot of cases at the moment. Some of us have more space than others, but we were thinking about kind of physical space and also the emotional space that we need to give ourselves and our young people. Vanessa, do you want to talk a little bit more about the physical side?
Well, I suppose even just physically thinking a little bit about how you use your home at the moment. It's something that we became very conscious of in my family after the first few days, was that our teenage sons were spending a lot of time in the room. We were working from home, so we'd kind of taken over the sitting room and the kitchen, and our teenage sons were confined to the room day and night. Which really wasn't ideal for them and wasn't going to work on the long term. So for us as a family, it was about really starting to look at our home and think about more creative ways that we could use it. So really setting up even just a workstation, places like the hall or the landing, where we could do Zoom meetings. And that really meant that people weren't overly confined to one room and people could move around the house. And I suppose the other piece is around how you use your house, that you might, think about new ways of using the spaces in your house. So we have kind of started to move to different parts of the house for different parts of the day. So for different meals, we might choose to be in the kitchen. If the weather was quite nice, we might just sit out for a cup of tea. But just begin to think about that space and how you might be able to use it in a different way, because it feels sometimes then like you're moving around and you're not as confined as maybe you might feel otherwise.
And I suppose in the emotional capacity, giving space, what we're thinking is it is really important to acknowledge some of the feelings that for young people that they're having. So obviously there's a lot of disappointment, a lot of hurt, a lot of upset, anger, frustration, fear, whole range of different things. And it's about offering young people the chance to express that and to talk about it. One of the things that we are getting through on some of the online chats from young people is maybe a bit of a fear around talking to their parents about how they're feeling, because they're worried about adding to the stress of their parents. That parents are struggling with paying the rent, with unemployment, with bills, with the future. And so young people are very conscious of not wanting to add to that, which is completely understandable in the context that we're in. But also, I suppose for all of us, we need an opportunity maybe to express a little bit of what's going on for us in an appropriate way. So maybe it's thinking about, can I give some space as a family to what we're all feeling, but contain that as well. So I suppose what we want to avoid maybe is people talking about the distress continuously all day and not finding a way to maybe resolve or manage that a little bit, but to give space to allow people to talk about what's going on for them, and then to contain that for a certain point throughout the day as well.
And I suppose just one other point about the space was, to think a little bit about how the young people in your life get to engage with other young people. At the moment, we're all confined to our homes. And I suppose it's just to think a little bit, especially for teenagers, it can be a time when they really, really depend on their peers, and it's a huge part of their life. And I suppose it's just to begin to think about how do we facilitate that. And for me as a parent, that was something I had to really think about around. We would have been a bit more strict, I suppose, and we've loosened our rules around screen time, because we have found that as a good means for the young people in our family to engage with their friends and to socialise. And obviously, we had to have some safety precautions around how to do that safely. But at the same time, it is given that avenue and that kind of focus that becomes a more sociable one, and helps to maintain those friendships, which I think are important and very important for young people, I suppose, at that age as well.
Were you going to?
Yeah, this next one around the role, what we're really conscious of, myself and Jen, when we were talking about this, was how, for us at the moment, our roles have changed in some ways. So, we are working from home, and so my children are used to me coming home and being quite engaged with them. But at the moment, I'm working from home, so I'm on Zoom calls and I'm on phone calls and so on and so forth. So my engagement in the home might feel quite different to them, and that's something that I think is important to talk about, that actually for this period of time I'm at work, and so it might feel a little bit different to you. And and I suppose it's important that young people begin to recognize the difference in the boundary between what is your work time and what is back to being your family time, and that you take care of that boundary. But also, I suppose it's all of the other roles. We've become really conscious through some of the calls that have come into us around parents who really feel the need to be parent, to be the coach, to be the teacher, and to replace all of these relationships that actually would be, would take a whole community to support that child with all of those different things. So it is something for us to begin to, I suppose, stop and pay attention to. What is our role as a parent? How do I support the young person in my life, with their exercise? How do I support them with their schoolwork? And if you think about things like schoolwork, we do have a situation where teachers are providing schoolwork for the young people and assigning different work that they can do from home and linking in with them. But I would feel that our role as parents, I suppose, is to stop and really pay attention to what young people are doing. So what is their work plan for today? And just touching in to find out how that's going, and do they need help with that, or do they need support? What I find sometimes, especially for teenagers, is that the kind of support that they might need is around really learning how to negotiate with a teacher, learning how to communicate. If they're given a deadline by two teachers that are the same, to be able to learn to say back, well, actually, could I change the time to get that back to you, because I also have to get back an assignment from my other teacher at that time. And they're not skills that you just know naturally. They're skills that we develop, and we particularly develop them over our teenage years. So, I suppose for us as parents, that's something that we can really help to support and facilitate and help the young people in our lives to develop those skills. And also there are things like, not necessarily being able to help with all of the homework, but maybe help to expand on certain ideas or certain projects that they're working on. What is your idea about that? And having a conversation that helps that young person to expand on that idea, or to work with them around how they're presenting that work back to their teacher. So there are a few of the thoughts we had. Sorry, Jen.
Sorry, Vanessa, but just what I would say on that as well, though, is don't feel under pressure, because I know I started initially and having to thinking that I need to do all of the work that a teacher was doing, and I can't because I'm not a teacher, and having to keep people busy all the time, and I've got 3 different class ages. I can't do that, and then kind of coming with that was the guilt of not doing the same things that maybe some other parents were doing with their kids, and the worry that, oh my goodness, are those children going to be better educated going back to school than mine are, and that kind of fear or that worry. And I really had to take a step back from that and go, no, wait a minute, my job is as a parent first and foremost to my children. I'm not a teacher, and the chances are they probably are going to miss out a little bit on schoolwork. I can't, while I'm working at the same time, I can't be doing the same level of input as maybe some other parents are doing, and that's okay. I have to find a way to kind of become all right with that. And speaking to the school, they're all in the same boat. They'll all catch up at some point. This isn't going to be detrimental. But I think for me, a lot of it is about taking the pressure off of having to do the same as everybody else and having to be all things to all people, because I don't think any of us can be all things to all people all of the time without disappearing ourselves completely. So I suppose that kind of links to one of the really important messages that we wanted to get across, is the idea of self-care and self-compassion. And that's something that we talk about in Jigsaw a lot, the idea that unless you put on your own oxygen mask first, you can't support your children and put theirs on. So, it can feel selfish, and it can be one of the most difficult things as a parent to say, no, I need time for me, or I need space for myself. But unless we do that, we're just going to find it harder and harder to cope with the challenges that our young people are maybe facing. So we've got some online courses on Jigsaw Online around self-care for parents, and we'll be putting up more articles and things, and perhaps coming back to a webinar specifically on self-care. And I suppose linked to that is the idea of self-compassion, and something that is really important to keep coming back to, the idea that we're doing good enough. You know, none of us might be doing the best thing possible. We might not be fantastic parents all of the time, but we're doing the best that we can in really challenging circumstances. And I think that's something that we all need to kind of hold on to and to acknowledge, and keep reminding ourselves that, you know, we're doing good enough.
I suppose just if people have any questions, I just wanted to put a reminder out there that if you can type them into us, we'll be able to answer any questions that people might have, or even comments or any feedback so far.
Yeah, always happy to answer a few questions. Did you want to add anything else on self-compassion there, Vanessa?
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up quite well there. I mean, for me, it's about stopping to, you know, take that time to reflect and to think about what are the things going on. I think sometimes, you know, if we think back to one of the earlier slides there, when we think about being threat focused or being focused on our drive, sometimes when we're in those sort of spaces, we go into, you know, what I sometimes think of as threat and drive. So I'm driven all the time to try and do better and to try and be perfect and get it all, you know, the very best way I can possibly be, and be a teacher and a parent and all those other things that we listed out there. And I'm driven to do that, but I'm driven to do that from a place of threat, and from a place of feeling that maybe I'm not good enough, or it's not going to be enough. And I suppose that, you know, that piece around stopping to connect again with how I'm feeling and with my story and what's going on for me right now, because for us all right now, we are all going through this together. Everybody in this country and actually internationally, this is a huge crisis that's affecting us all, and we all have to process that and deal with that and learn to cope with that. And so for me, the self-compassion comes in there, because I start to empathize a little bit more with myself when I recognize that I am really doing my best, and it is a struggle, and you know, focusing on that struggle sometimes makes me feel inadequate, but actually recognizing the struggle means that I might empathize with that and feel a bit more compassionate. And you know, that can be quite soothing. And also sometimes I find that actually means that I, in the end, do a better job, because I am looking after myself as well in the process. So I think that's really important for all of us as parents to think about.
Cool. I'm gonna go back to our lovely faces. I think stop screen sharing there. Although I can't. Yeah. A question has come in from Joe. So she's got a 9-year-old who's a worrier and is struggling to sleep. In particular, having concerns about her grandfather. So she's wondering how to manage that anxiety. At the moment, she's trying to reassure her 9-year-old, but that can go on for quite a few hours. And she's wondering, should she ignore the anxiety or manage it differently, or what can she do? Oh, are you there, Vanessa? Do you want to? Sorry.
So I was thinking there, I suppose in relation to that one, I think it is really important for us, and it doesn't really matter how young the young people in our lives are, this is affecting them, and they will have their questions about it. And sometimes I suppose in the vacuum of not having some things explained, our anxieties can grow, and uncertainty is another thing that makes our anxieties grow. So I think that's a really important thing to start to connect with that young person around, that absolutely right now we don't know what exactly is going to happen, but what we do know right now and what is certain is that we're all safe in this house right now, and our grandparents right now are safe. We don't know, and we are putting in precautions, and that's why as a country we're reacting by putting in precautions right now to protect ourselves and to keep ourselves staying safe. I suppose the other piece with young people, there is a piece around, you know, I'm not sure if that in relation to that question, if the young person is asking those questions at night time. It is something that we often see, that young people will really begin to worry about these things, and worries start to escalate a little bit more at night time when they're going to bed. And in that situation, it's important to have some time during the day to maybe just have a time to talk about our worries, or talk about what are the things that are coming up in our head, and to contain it in that way, so that at night time again, being compassionate, it might be about being firm but kind in that moment. That right now, the kindest thing I can do for you right now is to be firm. That look, we will talk more about this tomorrow in the space that we give every day to talk about these things. But right now, it's time for bedtime. It's time for sleep, and it's time for having happy dreams. And I suppose that can be helpful. I think when young people know that there is going to be a regular conversation and that they're going to have a space to talk about it, they learn quite quickly to begin to use that space a little bit more to focus in on the things that are worrying them and to bring them up. And I think having honest answers, because I think sometimes as parents, our inclination is to overprotect from the point of view of denying it all. Whereas, you know, it's very hard to escape that right now. So young people hear a lot more than we realize they hear, and you know, they tune into an awful lot more about what's happening. So I think honesty, but at a level that's suitable for that young person, and that you know, that they're going to be able to understand.
There's just a comment here from Caroline that writing down stuff helps, like a journal. And absolutely to agree with that in terms of being able to express your own emotions. If you haven't necessarily got somebody to talk to or somebody that you want to talk to, being able to get the emotions out in some way is really helpful. So writing things down, or music or art, and for younger people as well, for younger children, art is a great way to do that. We've got a question: any tips on supporting a Leaving Cert student who's working hard but concerned or anxious that the exams won't go ahead? That's a big one that we're getting through actually from some of the chats as well, is concerned about will they happen, but also the motivation, you know, how do I keep working at the moment if I'm not sure that they're going to happen? So I'm finding it hard to get up every day, to people who are kind of feeling, well, I'm going to fall behind, so what's the point? So how do we support a Leaving Cert student who's that concerned? So this one is working hard but concerned or anxious the exams won't go ahead.
I think at the moment, from what we're being told, the exams will go ahead. So I think all we can do is go with the information that we have right now. And again, I think this is a product of what's happening in this time, because it's such a huge time of transition and change that we all kind of know that there's uncertainty with a lot of things, and the Leaving Cert's one of those things. But at the moment, we are being told that it will go ahead. So I suppose with that in mind, it is about really trying to put in a study plan, and you know, maybe linking in with teachers who can advise about what's the best way to go forward right now with the learning and with the study plan that young person might have. And I suppose again, for us as parents, it's about giving a space and making sure there's a balancing act at home with that. You know, that sometimes young people, when it's coming up to their exams, they can spend every single minute of the day trying to cram in as much study as they can. And it is important to have kind of a balancing act, and to stop and look at what else do I need to do to keep myself well right now. And there's a lot of other things that we need to do besides just studying and working. So you know, for anybody, whether you're doing your exams or whether you're working, we need a work-life balance, and that's all the more important now that we're working from our homes. So I think you know, as parents, it's also about facilitating that and reminding that you also need a little bit of rest and relaxation. And sometimes with young people that come to Jigsaw coming up to exams, we often talk about the preparation for an exam being almost like preparation for a marathon, which sounds a bit strange. But I mean, if you think about somebody preparing for a marathon, yes, they need to practice, they need to build up their stamina, and you know, they certainly need to get lots of work in terms of practicing for that. But they also need to look after themselves. They need to make sure that they're getting the right nutrition. They need to make sure they're getting the right level of sleep, and they need to make sure they have rest and relaxation, because if they overdo it, they're running a risk of injuries or of becoming unwell. And that's the same for a young person preparing for their Leaving Cert. And they really need to look after themselves, more so probably than any other time in their life, because they have more stress going on at that period of time.
The other thing I'd sometimes say with anxiety is that, you know, the what ifs, and kind of imagining a worst case scenario. And, you know, some students, their heads will be going to, well, what if I do all this work and then it's all cancelled? And they're imagining a really horrific scenario. So kind of bringing it back down to say, well, what is the concern? Okay, so if they don't go ahead, then what's the worst that can happen in that situation? You know, what is the real fear at the end of the day? And trying to work through, well, what are the chances of it happening? Which, let's be honest, in the current situation, who knows what may or may not happen going forward. But if whatever the worst concern or fear is does happen, how are we going to cope with it? And kind of looking at the strengths that that student has, that they have got a supportive network around them, that they've got, a school who's going to support them, and kind of reaffirming some of the strengths that they have to deal with whatever situation might come across, rather than kind of negating the anxiety and saying, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. But actually kind of really kind of pulling it out and coming through it and looking at the anxiety in a little bit of detail to kind of say, is it likely to happen? No, maybe it's not. But even if it does happen, how are we going to cope with it and manage it, and provide that reassurance? Not that the concern won't happen, but that if it does, that you'll be able to manage. Okay. Do you have any questions there? I've got another one, Vanessa, but do you have any coming through?
No, I don't at the moment. No.
Okay. I've got one on bedtime difficulty. So having 5 with age ranging between 11 to nearly 18 years. Wow, fair play. How can I manage to organise bedtimes, taking into account the range of ages, as routine has changed quite a bit?
I think with bedtimes there needs to be some level of sync in a family. So there needs to be, I suppose with an 18-year-old, it's about negotiating with them to see how they can get a little bit more in sync with other members of the family. Obviously at the age of 5, young people need to be in bed quite early, so the house needs to settle down a little bit. But I'm conscious as well that 18-year-olds often, their life starts a bit more in the evenings, and that's when their friends might be online and different things like that might be happening. So I suppose, I'm saying that, and there is a little bit of learning, a little bit of tolerance with that. So for me, my advice there would be around negotiating, I suppose, with the 18-year-old. Look, how can we create a space that is respectful to everybody, that takes on board the needs of your youngest sibling there at 5, and that helps you to be a little bit more in sync with the family, but also helps us to also consider your needs, that you might need to be a little bit up later, or that might be a space when you link in with some of your friends as well.
I think also possibly bringing some of the older children into a kind of a role modeling supportive role, that I need you on my side to help with dealing with the younger ones, and showing them, how we all respond. And, I'm not asking for you to go to sleep straight away or anything like that, but, to try and encourage them to become part of the solution, rather than viewing them, that everyone is part of the problem, getting that kind of negotiation going again, as you said, Vanessa. Okay, clicking through here. An example of a good routine that all the family can follow. Wow.
That's a big one. I suppose what we were saying earlier on, it's around having a bit more of a loose routine. So, I would feel at the moment, back to what I said previously, around, trying to be in sync a little bit with each other, and having a loose routine that means that you're connecting in with each other regularly over the course of the day. And that might be to go for a walk, or it might be just to stop for a mid-morning snack, or, for different meal times. Or just even just deciding once or twice in the week we're going to watch a movie together, whatever that might be. But begin to think and negotiate as a family to develop a more loose routine, because I suppose having a very strict, rigid routine right now might be quite difficult to do in the confines of your home, when we bear in mind all the different styles of coping and the different activities that people are engaged in at home, whether it's schoolwork or other work that they're working from home with as well.
A good question here. So some young adults are redeployed into new working environments, and how can we best support them during this time? Absolutely. I mean, certainly a combination, I suppose, people being redeployed into challenging situations, or the work environment changing and becoming more demanding, or maybe quite a bit scarier than they had been before. And I suppose on the opposite side of that as well, we also have lots of young people who are maybe being made unemployed at this time, and facing into a period of uncertainty. So in terms of supporting older young people, Vanessa, any kind of specifics?
I mean, I suppose it is a difficult situation when you have, I suppose as a parent, you're worrying when you have, and whatever age your young person is in your home, you're worrying about them when they're going out into the workplace. And so there's managing your own emotions around that, and learning how to, I suppose, support them within that process. But also, I'm quite conscious as well that a lot of people that are going out to work at the moment, they're working all kinds of different hours and different shift work and things like that as well. So, there might be some individual things that might need to happen in that family to support that and facilitate that. If that young person's working night duty or working late into the evening, just begin to think about when we're talking about that loose routine and having to really have some connections as family, how you can build that in, because that young person will still really need those connections and they will be important to them too. And I suppose they might be looser over the course of a week as opposed to over the course of the day, but they might be really important. And just creating some space for them, and maybe just asking, because I suppose a young person at that age, they're in a better place in their life to be able to communicate some of their needs. And so giving them a space to talk about, well, what are your needs right now, or even just asking them a question might get them to think a little bit about that, and come up with an answer, or think about it over a few days to process what they might want or what they might need right now.
And I guess some of the practical physical things as well, are they staying hydrated? Are, having nutritious meals and those kinds of things that with older young people, people in their early 20s, they're maybe a little bit more independent, but sometimes kind of when they're all living together under the same roof again, we kind of, it's not a bad thing to fall into that kind of protective, caring space, or just keeping an eye on their physical health as well. We've got a question around, is there an example of a good grounding technique that all the family can follow?
It's getting them all to follow it. It's the hard. I mean, I really like mindfulness, and I mean, one of the ways I have found for our family to practice mindfulness in a way that I can get teenage boys to do is that we pay attention to the birds that are coming into the garden. So the Wildlife Association of Ireland had a chart out last week where you had to kind of track the birds, and that was really helpful because I brought it up more as a curiosity. I wonder what birds are coming. It would be really interesting to find out, and we should spend like 20 minutes here and there over the course of the week and see what birds we spot. And it's kind of become a bit of a competition in our house, but it has been really helpful as a grounding exercise to really slow down and to stop and to pay attention and just connect with the outside world as well. So that's certainly been quite helpful, even though they don't really know that's what I'm doing.
I quite like using the five senses, so kind of getting everybody to stop and think and kind of look around and see five different things that they can notice in their environment, or five different colors. For my girls, colors is a big thing. Then kind of listening, as you said, Vanessa, can I hear different things going on in around me? What can I smell? What can I feel with my mouth, and taking a deep breath. I think it's just good to get all the different senses involved when we're grounding. But I would say there's some really good apps. I think you mentioned mindfulness, and Headspace is a good option for some people. And there's lots of other good apps available, and we've reviewed a few of them. So there's a few on Jigsaw Online. There's a few recommendations for different types of apps that might be quite helpful. Just gonna so we've got a gentleman whose young person was attending Jigsaw until recently and was doing okay, but has had a bit of a meltdown, and he'd like him to re-engage with Jigsaw, but the young person's reluctant. So that's, I mean, whether that's through this time or in general, we'd often have young people who are maybe a little bit reluctant to engage with Jigsaw. How might we encourage that or engage that young person?
I think, I mean, for me, we've had young people who have been brought in by their parents because parents have been really worried and have just said, I'll get them in the door and then you can work your magic on making them stay. And I suppose that's not really how it works. We really need to collaborate with young people in a way that's respectful and mutual, I suppose. So the piece of work that I often would recommend in that situation is to encourage it, is to plant the seed, is to suggest it. To ask questions like, I wonder, would Jigsaw be able to help with something like that? And I suppose, but also respect that they might not be in that space right now. And also, I suppose the other piece, when I hear about a meltdown, I think meltdowns might be reasonably normal right now because um, it's quite a big change for everybody, and there's all kinds of different transitions happening, and as we were saying earlier on, all kinds of different emotions coming to the fore. So, having a meltdown doesn't mean you have to come to Jigsaw or that you're going to need to come to Jigsaw. It might be just a normal expression of that young person's distress at this time, and it might be how they're learning, or where they're at in terms of how they express their distress. So, there might be a little bit more of conversation to happen there, and that just, I would feel, kind of would help that young person to maybe express that, or come up with ways to express that, and then plant a seed for, do we need to offer additional support?
It was funny in some of the group chats that have been coming through with young people, and some of them were saying that they were feeling very sad, or they were feeling very anxious, and there was something wrong with them. And I suppose a message we were trying to give through the group chats to those young people is that in the current situation, it's absolutely normal to have those feelings and those emotions, and it would be a little bit strange if we didn't. So I think just to reassure that absolutely meltdowns and that kind of expression doesn't necessarily mean that things are going back to being really bad. It might just be a reaction to the situation that we're in. But absolutely, if he wants to re-engage with Jigsaw, we will be looking at options for that, and it isn't a one-time only option. If it's not right now, then we're here in the future as well, and that's really important. Okay. Both my girls are kind normally, but the older daughter, age 13, can act a bit too smart for her younger sister, with snappy remarks and cool gestures, haughty tone. Any tips to encourage a young teenager to be more patient and polite to her younger sister, understanding that they both miss their own respective peer groups?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think for that age group, it's about helping them to begin to empathize, and that can be about encouraging them to put themselves in their younger siblings' shoes and what might that be like. And I think appealing to their kind nature, because you're saying that this young person is normally quite kind, so appealing to that, if this young person is normally quite kind, they will have that empathy and some of those skills there already. So I think appealing to that, and asking them to consider what that's like, but also maybe looking at, well, what can we do to help you? Because maybe this isn't really normally your style, and this isn't the way that you normally engage with your younger sister. So is there something that we can do to support you right now? Because maybe that's a product of you not feeling so great, or you trying to express something. So what can we do to support you with that? I think that tackling it in that sort of way, again, it's showing some compassion, and it's showing empathy, and it's validating how they might be feeling, and it's modeling how you want them to behave with their younger sibling as well.
Yeah, I think modeling is really important, and I think acknowledging, I know this isn't really you, or I know you don't mean to be upsetting in what you say. Kind of acknowledging that that young person isn't usually like that, but this is the way it comes across, and being kind of upfront and honest about the impact of that. When you do this, this is what it feels like for me as a parent, or this is what it feels like to your sister at a time that maybe they're not doing that, kind of addressing the behavior after the fact, because in the moment it can feel very fraught or very tense, and it can be a difficult time to address it. But at a time maybe when you're on your own with her later, that would be better. Oh my goodness, sorry, I turned my phone off. Sorry.
But I think as
Um,
well, when we're in a certain emotional state, we see the world and we see our relationships through that lens. So if we're angry, we see the world through an angry lens. And I think that's important for us to think about as parents, because we're all like this. And I know I certainly need to go away sometimes and calm down before I can connect in with that empathy and that compassion that is normally there. If I'm angry, just stay away from me. So I think a lot of us are like that. And it's recognizing that. So I think Jen's really right when she says that it might be about waiting until I suppose that scene has changed, and that the young person is in a different frame of mind, and it'll be easier to have that conversation.
if you could give just one piece of advice as a parent yourselves, to support families during this scary and unsettling time, what would it be, just one piece of advice as a parent.
Be kind.
Be kind. Yeah, I would say
Everybody
I would,
else.
I would say take the pressure off. You know, we're doing what we can. We're trying to get through, and if all we do is survive, that's good enough. If you can do all of the great creating and doing and having a lovely experience, all the better. But you know, just getting through each day in one piece and coming through as a family unit, that's a real significant achievement. So I would say take the pressure off and know that you're doing your best. And Vanessa, you said be kind.
Yeah, and I think like if you decided that there's only one rule in our house right now, and that is to be kind, it covers a multitude. You know, it covers the disagreements you might have with your partner. It covers the disagreements that siblings will have with each other. It'll cover, you know, the way that you interact and all those different interactions that happen in the home. And just being able to ask, well, is that being kind? Because that's what we've agreed. And you know, it's quite a simple one, but it really it's not simple to do, I suppose, in practice, you know. So yeah.
Absolutely. Practicing what we preach. We're all doing our best. Okay, I'm just going to double check and make sure there's no more specific questions that we can answer at this time, which I don't think there is. Just to say to you, we will be putting this webinar up on Jigsaw Online tomorrow, so you can go in and have a look at it and reflect on anything that we've said. Like we said at the start, anything that is useful, please take it. Anything that doesn't fit with you or doesn't resonate, then disregard it, absolutely. There is lots of other information on Jigsaw Online, and it would encourage all parents and young people as well to sign up. We've got a regular newsletter coming out a couple of times a week, which will kind of update you on future webinars, on kind of questions that are coming through and how we're answering them. There's different kind of videos going up regularly. So if you sign up to the email, then you'll get those straight into your inbox, and you can turn off some of the scrolling on social media if that's helpful to you. Is there anything else, Vanessa, that you wanted to add before we finish up?
No, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for linking in, and it's been an enjoyable conversation for me as a parent as well. So I think at any situation where we get to really think about how we're handling things as parents and handling things in our home and looking after ourselves, I think you know, it's food for thought, and I just like to thank everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a good evening and the rest of the week.
Bye.